Good morning, Smart News. The word of the day is perspective. We have 3 different news stories that give us a lot of perspective on the current news and life cycle that we share. So I want to go through them one by one, give you a little quick dose of information. I got to be careful using that word dose. By the way, when I say word of the day, does anyone start hearing number of the day from Sesame Street play in their head? Or is that just me? Is that just a reflection of where I am in my life? I'm not going to sing it for you. I tried to do math for you yesterday. I'm not going to sing for you today. Okay, I'm going to start off. We're going to actually go around the world a little bit. So I want to start off with a picture for you. Let me show you this picture. This picture is of a little girl getting swabbed for COVID-19 in citywide testing. Where do you think that is? Let me show you another picture that might seem familiar to you. These are residents that are looking at grocery shelves trying to stock up because of a new shutdown in some of the blocks that they live. Where do you think that is? Let me show you a map because I think this will be helpful. The first picture was from a city called Beijing. The second picture was from a city that you know well called Wuhan, a city of more than 11 million people where the outbreak of the virus that causes COVID-19 was first really established and identified in the world. Of course, there's all sorts of questions about that. I'm not necessarily going there today, but what I want you to know in both of these cities, there are citywide testing that the Chinese government is doing because they are noticing an uptick in COVID-19 cases. So imagine citywide testing for 11 million people. Do you want to know how many cases they identified in Wuhan yesterday, according to the Associated Press? 3. But the rise in cases is enough to start this sort of activity. Now, you might say, Jenna, can we actually trust data coming out of China? Of course, there's always a question about reliability. For context, remember Wuhan is bigger than the city of New York, America's largest city. The 7-day moving average, which we like to look at when it comes to COVID-19 cases because it smooths out, one big day and one small day, is about 1,300 cases a day. That's much lower than other places that we're looking at, but is important because it's also increasing a little bit in New York City. So what's the big takeaway? What's the big takeaway when you see Wuhan doing the citywide testing? We're watching infection rates in America. The big takeaway is places where we have seen previous surges for COVID-19 are seeing increases in cases. And so this is something just to be aware of. We know the data is not perfect. The data is infallible, which is not infallible, which brings us to the second point, an article in the Wall Street Journal. I put this on our website, by the way, because I think this is really important because it's raising some questions about some of the data that we're seeing and some really important data that is being used for public policy. So what is we've talked about over the last week that we've learned that the CDC said was different about what we're seeing now versus the past? What they said is that the viral load of someone who is infected with the virus that causes COVID-19 is the same between vaccinated and unvaccinated individuals. And this is a reason that they're concerned about vaccinated individuals not wearing masks in tight public places. They're concerned about transmission. So this led to a policy change that the recommendation is that everybody mask up in tight public settings. Over the course of the last several days, a variety of different doctors, physicians, and researchers have said, wait a minute, viral load is important and we should pay attention to it, but it doesn't necessarily lead to a direct correlation between how contagious and transmissible you may be. So let me just say, I have a cup of coffee here. Can you read this coffee cup, by the way? This is so inappropriate. I don't know, is it backwards for you? It might be bubbly. It's actually coffee. So let's say I have a cup of coffee and you have a cup of coffee, and we say, hey, we have the same amount of coffee, right? But does that mean, can we just take that and say, well, we're getting the same amount of caffeine? No, we can't, right? Because we might have different brands of coffee, different levels of caffeine. Maybe my cup is decaf, it's not. But we can't just look at the amount. We actually have to look at the quality of the viral load. And the quality of the viral load is going to tell us how contagious somebody is. Former FDA Commissioner Scott Gottlieb said this weekend, it's not just, again, about the amount of viral load in the nose, although important. It's a question about how long for someone like who's vaccinated, it stays at a high level. Does someone that's vaccinated, have the same viral load at the time that they're symptomatic, but then that is less in 24 hours. That's the example that he was using. So again, it's a question about how we're using some of the new information that we're getting, a question about some of the conclusions that we're coming to as far as the US government. That's why what's really important when we're looking at data, and we get so data focused, I know I do, because why? Because we're looking for certainty, we're looking for facts, that we also have to complement the data with reporting. Reporting really matters during this time. I've spoken with doctors from the West Coast to the East Coast. I've spoken with doctors who are working in the ERs, and what they're saying across the board is consistent. And I think you should know this. They're saying 90% of the people that are in their ERs or ICUs are unvaccinated. They're also noticing a trend that they're younger. So we're seeing that from our doctors. We're also seeing that from data. The Florida, I believe it was the Hospital Association, just reported that it's 96% of people that are in their ERs right now are unvaccinated. Here's the thing though. We just reached a critical level. The federal government was looking to get 70% of eligible adults vaccinated. We reached that level. We just reached that level. So over the next 2, 4, 6 weeks, with this rise in cases, we are going to have some data that's going to tell us a story. Remember, the CDC is not the only place that collects data. Your state collects data, your city collects data. So we're going to have more information. And sometimes it doesn't feel like that more information leads to more clarity. But in this case, I'm hopeful. And that's where we're going to leave that today. I want to take you one other place that has nothing to do with COVID. This is a runner from Belarus. And I'm bringing up this for a very particular reason. This runner criticized her coaches. They put her in an event at the Olympics that she never trained for. After she criticized them, according to reports, she was hustled to the airport where she was supposed to be flown back to Belarus. Why? Because you can't speak out against those in power in Belarus. You can't do it. Over the last several months, we covered a story of an activist who was flying over the area of Belarus. He wasn't going home to Belarus. He was flying over. And the authorities there diverted the plane, told the pilot that the plane was in threat of being hijacked. They had an emergency landing and they dragged that activist off the plane. EU officials accused the Belarusian government of hijacking that plane. Imagine doing that for someone that's criticizing you. So this is the context, right? You have someone in power in Belarus for decades that is putting down any opposition with force. And this runner said she felt vulnerable. She did not want to fly home. She approached law enforcement at the airport. And the reports are that she will seek asylum, that she's getting a humanitarian visa for right now in Poland. Let me just show you the map for why I'm even mentioning this story to you. It's sort of a fascinating story, just on a personal interest. Here's Belarus. To the right is Russia. To the left is Poland. Belarus and Russia, they work together. They're allies. Why do we care about this? We've really been watching the actions by Russia. And while the whole entire world is distracted, and rightfully so, with big stories about what's happening with COVID-19 and the Olympics and everything else, we don't want to lose sight of other different stories that could quickly rise to being a top story. Vladimir Putin has talked more aggressively about Ukraine as of late. You have this partnership with Belarus. The government is becoming more aggressive against opposition. So this is a part of the world I just think it's important to watch while we're keeping an eye on other really important stories that affect our lives. Please check out smarternews.com because all of the information that we talk about here is also there. And that way you can check it out when you desire. Okay, have a great day, guys. Grab your coffee or whatever your pleasure. At this point in the pandemic, whatever you like. Have a great day, and always more at smarternews.com. Bye, guys.